So here we are, guys. We've reached the end of the year. Well, we've been in the new year for the past several days. But in terms of movies, we reached the end of the year. I have watched my last few 2020 releases, and in doing so, I am ready to make my best list. But before I do, there are 3 remaining 2020 releases that I wanted to do reviews for, so I ended up watching these 3 movies. But here's the thing. I was planning on doing full reviews for these like usual, but then I just kind of came to the conclusion that I don't have a lot to say about these last 3 films. It's not that I don't want to, I'm just not really feeling it, I'm not feeling doing a 12, 13-minute review for all these. I could, but I would just rather do it this way. Now, I want to be clear. This is not a catch-up review. I don't consider it as one. This really is just a video talking about these final 3 films, what I like, what I dislike, all that kind of stuff. It's going to be more in the format of my very first catch-up review, where it's a full review pretty much done in one take and things like that. I give a small... I give a mini review towards all of these. There's only 3 movies to talk about, so I don't have a lot to say, but we're just getting into right now, starting off with the first movie. Alright, so the first one we're going to be talking about is First Cow, and what this film is essentially about is we center on our main character, Cookie. He is this cook of sorts that basically is very much not taken seriously in Oregon. He is someone that is frequently ridiculed by a bunch of these fur trappers, and in going through Oregon, he seems to find one real connection in this Chinese immigrant that he strikes up a actual friendship with, and the two of them decide to basically start working on this successful business together. However, they're going to have to do that by stealing this cow and being able to get this cow's milk, and that's obviously not going to come as an easy that's obviously not going to be an easy feat, so we basically see them trying to go through that throughout the rest of this film. Now, I was very excited for this one. This was, any A24 film that comes out is one that I get very excited for, and First Cow is a movie I've been trying to watch for a long time now. It just ended up being one of the last films I watched in 2020, and for me, I think it absolutely lived up to the hype. I think this film is definitely something that is very special, but also keeps things very simple, and that's what I really did appreciate about it right off the bat. I think that's something that works really well when it comes to this film, but the performances also here are extraordinary. I think both John Magaro and Orion Lee carry this film perfectly. You really get the sense of who these two characters are. You really do understand their hopes and dreams, and I think they really do act out these roles quite well. John Magaro especially, I think, very much impressed me here because he has very little dialogue in this movie. And Cookie as a character, we're still able to understand who he is. We're still able to really sympathize with him throughout this film. Understand how much certain things mean to him, and I really did love what he ended up doing here. And like I said, Orion Lee as well, I thought was just a really great... I really haven't seen him at all before. He's had some smaller roles and things, but nothing ever to this scale, and I really do hope he's able to do more stuff moving forward, because I thought both of them just anchored this film really nicely overall. The directing here by Kelly Reichardt, though, that's the other thing that really works very well for me with this film, is that the film, the way it's directed... If this was handled in the wrong way, it could be really boring, but she just puts so much passion and so much, I think, humanity into this film. This film feels very human, but it also feels just, I think, very tender and sweet, and it mainly is due to her directing here. It's a very wholesome film in that way, and I think her directing is a big part of why that is. I very much like what she ended up doing here. I really haven't seen much from her before, but I've heard a lot of people say, this feels like the movie she's kind of always wanted to direct, and it does definitely feel that way. Watching it now, I can definitely agree with that for sure, because I think that's definitely a very very fair assessment, I would say, and I think that's something that she just did an excellent job with. In terms of the screenplay, though, that's the other thing I really enjoy about this movie. It's, right off the bat, a lot of fun to watch. There's a lot of comedy in this movie. This is a very humorous situation, and I think that situation, is one that is definitely a lot of fun to play out. But what really impressed me about this film is how much time we're really given to flesh out these two characters. It does take a while for them to pull off this heist of sorts, and for them to decide to do what they end up doing. We take a lot of time to get to see who these two characters are. Cookie is someone who, like I said, nobody really takes him seriously. He is constantly pestered by these just really spoiled, these really spoiled fur trappers who they're constantly harassing him throughout the film to like make them all these dishes and things like that. And he is someone that he wants to take this seriously. Like, this is something he wants to do. He wants to open a restaurant. He wants to be able to cater to those people, and you can see that the character of the character of King Lu is the only one that really respects that. He's really the only person that seems to take him seriously, that seems to have a genuine connection with him. So you can really see why these two bond as well as they do. And I think the film really does take a lot of time to get you behind both of these characters. And I really did appreciate that. But I also appreciate the fact that the film has very little dialogue. And that can be very hard to pull off. But there is dialogue throughout this movie, but there's just as many moments where they aren't talking to when they are talking. And I think that was a really interesting approach, but I think it really did work for this film because these are two very quiet characters. They're very introverted in that way. They don't really have like a lot of friends or anything like that. And I think that's very well presented when it comes to the screenplay here. But like I said, it's also just a lot of fun to see them pull off this heist, and I think they did a really good job with that overall. Cinematography, though, in this movie as well is so well done. It's a very visceral film. It really puts you into this setting very nicely, and I really did like that a lot. I think that the 1900s setting, it just works very well for this movie. There are a lot of beautiful landscape shots and things like that, and it seemed to me like a lot of this film was in natural lighting. There's a scene when Cookie and, when Cookie and King Lu first meet. I mean, it was like pitch black dark for them. Like, I literally had to turn up the brightness on my TV, and normally that would be a complaint, but I actually thought it was interesting the way they decided to use what seemed like natural lighting throughout this entire movie. I thought that was a really good choice, and I thought it helped make the film feel that much more realistic. It's a really good, like, period piece in that way, and I definitely did appreciate that. I like the score here a lot. It's not played a ton in this movie, but when it's played, it's definitely one that's very effective. And the editing, the film is 2 hours long, but it really did fly by for me. I found myself just really getting invested into who these two characters really are, and I think, again, just the simplicity of it all, it works very well with this runtime. The film, it definitely can be a slow burn, but I never found myself bored with what was going on. I found myself invested pretty much every step of the way. The only things I will say that I think brings this film down overall is the fact that all of the other characters in this movie, they're just kind of there. They don't really have a lot to do. There's not really a lot of time given for them to be fleshed out or anything like that. And so, as a result, it causes quite a few of them to kind of just feel generic and not really leave much of an impact on me at all, and I think that kind of did bring things down. I will say the second half of this film did feel a little bit slow. The journey to them pulling off this heist, it does drag just a tad in that section. I think they could have done a better job with that, but really, other than that, I don't really have too many complaints with this movie. I think this is just such a fun and very charming film. It's a great film about this very unlikely friendship, and it's one that we have seen done before, but due to Reichardt's directing, great performances, and an overall very fun story, I think that's what really boosts First Cow into being one of the most unexpectedly heartwarming films of the entire year. So I'm definitely going to give First Cow overall an A-. So the next film I'm talking about is Sylvie's Love, and what this film is essentially about is it basically focuses on these two people. We have Sylvie, this girl that works in her father's record store, but she's always kind of hoped for more within her life. She feels very inspired in that way. And then we also have this character, Robert, who she one day stumbles across within the record store. They start to form this relationship of sorts, and we basically see that, they kind of go through this summer romance. It's something that really does affect the both of them, and then we eventually do skip ahead 5 years later, basically to see when they've gone their separate ways to pursue their dreams, and see that their feelings for each other have really not fade away at all, but also see just how complex this relationship is really going to be to pursue. I was excited for this one a lot. I thought that this was one of those films that seemed like it could really slip in towards the end of the year, seemed like one that people would really just start raving about, and, looking at the cast, looking at the premise, it just seemed like something that was going to be right up my alley. I really liked a lot of what we were seeing here. It just seemed like a really, really sweet romance film overall, and I gotta be honest, it kind of fell flat for me. Don't get me wrong, there's a lot of things I do enjoy about Sylvie's Love, but as a film, I just don't think it came together in the way that I think they really wanted to, and I think that did overall bring this film down. The one thing that definitely does elevate it, I would say, is Tessa Thompson's performance, which this is to be expected, but she's phenomenal in this role. I mean, I've said it before and I'll say it again. She really is setting herself up to be one of the best actresses working today. Any role that she takes on, she puts so much passion into it, and Sylvie is just such a likable lead in that way. She starts off as very wide-eyed, very much an ingenue in that way, someone that just, it feels like she is always looking for something more, and then eventually becomes a lot more sophisticated as the film goes on, and she just does such a great job portraying this role. Every emotion with her, it feels very genuine and sincere, and I just really love what Tessa Thompson has been doing lately, and this is another really strong performance from her for sure. And then I will also say Nnamdi Asomugha, who plays Robert, I thought also did a really good job, and he's not really that much of an actor. He is, of course, Kerry Washington's husband, but he's more of an athlete, and it doesn't really show. I thought he actually did give a pretty strong performance here. Robert's a character that is kind of complex in that way, and I thought that he did a really good job in diving deep into it, but he also was very charismatic in the role. You can understand why Sylvie would feel the connection with him that she really does, and I thought overall he was just very strong here. I really did like his performance in this film overall. I thought he definitely was one of the big, I thought that he definitely did a really just a very, very strong job in this film. And the chemistry between these two, I think, is the other thing that really does anchor this movie nicely. I think these two worked very well together. I really did enjoy their relationship throughout the film, and you find yourself rooting for these two very easily because of their relationship, and I think the film does a good job with that. And the supporting performances here as well are also really good. Aja Naomi King, especially, who plays Sylvie's sister Mona, is a big standout throughout this entire film. She's a lot of fun to watch, but she also, I think, is someone that just gives a very strong performance here, and I really did like what she ended up doing to this film. Again, not in a ton, but whenever she pops up, I enjoyed her a lot here. Also, Lance Reddick, not in the movie very much at all, but for his limited screen time, he very much makes the most of it, and gives, I think, one of the strongest performances within this entire film. Really, just this entire cast here, I think everyone does a really good job. I think everyone gives a really strong performance overall, and I think that's what really ends up working for this film. But now getting into the directing and the writing, that's the other thing that I do want to say. Eugene Ashe's directing in this film, I think, is overall well done. He's trying to make, I think, more of a tribute to 50s style romances, and he does do a pretty good job with that, I would say. The film definitely has that very old-timey feel throughout it, and he does a good job, and I think especially in the opening moments of this film, he presents this story that it just feels very warm. It feels very authentic. It feels like one that you really would see around that time, and I really did enjoy his directing throughout this film. I think that definitely did work in this movie overall, and I think his writing for I think his writing, at least for some of this film, is also really good. The film takes a lot of time to establish who Sylvie and Robert are. They both have very specific goals in life. Robert wants to become this big saxophone player. This is something that he's trying to pursue for a very long time, and he really does want that big break. And Sylvie, on the other hand, she wants to be a television producer, which you can see is very much frowned upon by a lot of people because, well, it's the 50s and she's black, and that's not something that normally happens. And so the film, I think, does do a good job of showing how these two are going to be able to not just, achieve these goals, but also overcome all of the, all of the controversy within them, all of the naysayers that are telling that they're not going to be able to do this, and how their relationship is going to prevail. Unfortunately, though, once the film shifts to that 5 years later, once we get to that jump and the two of them have pursued their goals, that's when the film really started to lose me. And it's not so much that things become boring, because it very much does not. I was never really bored with this film. There's still a lot of interesting stuff. We get to see how Sylvie is as a producer, the fact that she's been able to take this on. But Robert as a character, he just becomes very unlikable. I didn't like where they ended up going with him, and because of that, I didn't really find this relationship to be a very healthy one. But the film is acting like it very much is, and considering choices that are made, especially at the end of this movie, it just didn't really work for me. I found it to be very disingenuous, and it was weird because I thought, like I said, the first half of this film felt very earnest, felt very real, and then the third act comes around and it feels kind of melodramatic, honestly, and it just didn't really work for me. The ending especially, I found to be so cheesy and just not really working at all, and just did not feel very satisfying to the type of story they were trying to tell. I honestly would have liked it if the movie ended in a much different direction, but it really didn't. It felt like they went for the safest ending possible, even if it didn't really make sense for the type of story they're trying to tell here, because again, just Robert as a character, while he starts off likable, he goes in some directions in this film that I thought were just very questionable, and it made me question, like, do I really want these two to be together? And I kind of came to the conclusion that no, I really don't. I don't think that these two are good for each other. I think these two are better apart. I think they're better achieving these goals separately, and the film doesn't seem to really recognize that, and I wish that it would, because I think that's what overall does bring this film down. I think that's the thing that really does sink this film, is that it really wants to hammer home the fact that, like, these two are meant for each other, they should be together, and I just didn't really buy it overall. I think that's what really did hurt this film for me. So again, there are some things that do work. Cinematography wise, really good overall, definitely captures the look and the feel of the 50s and 60s very well, especially the contrast. I thought that was also really well done. You can tell when the film is trying to look like the 50s and when it's trying to look like the 60s, and I appreciate that a lot. I thought the score was very well done to this film. I definitely really enjoyed the score. And I think overall, editing-wise, I don't think this film was, again, boring. I was into it pretty much the whole time, and I did feel that we were given enough time in both periods in this film, in both the 50s and the 60s, and I think they did a good job with that overall. It just really came down to the fact that the way the film ended, it just left a very sour taste in my mouth, and because that, I just can't say I enjoyed this film overall. Strong performances from the two leads, a somewhat tender love story, but in my opinion, it really does get hampered by the fact that there are choices made in the third act that just don't really make this feel like a very healthy relationship. And overall, it just wasn't very fun to watch after a little bit because of certain choices that were made. So unfortunately, I am going to give Sylvies Love a C+. So the final film I'm going to be talking about is Martin Eden, and what this film is essentially about is we center on Martin Eden. He is this proletariat who also used to be a sailor. He's grown up in a very, low-class family, but he also is a writer and wants to be a very talented one at that. And so one day when he rescues this character, Arturo, he is taken into this very elite and very rich family who he doesn't really blend in with at all, and also starts starts to fall in love with the daughter, Elena, who basically tells him that, like, you know, if you want to be a very talented writer, then you need to transform yourself, you need to educate yourself, and basically gives him the chance to finally do what he's wanted to. But as the film goes on, he also starts to realize that their ideals very much might also conflict with his, and he really needs to make a decision whether or not he really wants to live this life. And I was really excited. So Martin Eden, I didn't really know much of anything about this film. In fact, I wasn't even really planning to watch it, but my good friend Kane LaPlante, he told me about it. He had a screening at his theater, told me about, he told me that they were doing it and said that pretty much anyone could get a ticket, so I figured, fuck it, this film's reviews were really strong, and I decided to make it my last 2020 film, or 2020 movie, just because of the fact that it was getting such high praise. And a lot of the time, I'll see these foreign films and they just kind of come out of nowhere, and I thought Martin Eden could be one of those. And I will say, this film is really good. It's not great. I think there are definitely some things that do bring it down, but overall, I definitely did really enjoy this one. I think the thing that definitely works very well in this film, and I think the thing that is worth watching alone, is Luca Marinelli's performance, who plays Martin Eden. He is fucking amazing in this movie. He just does such a great job at showing the confliction, but also the passion of this character. Martin is someone who, he's very determined to be a writer. This is something that matters a lot to him, but he also is very passionate when it comes to his ideals and his politics, and you can see that he's someone that isn't just going to sit back. He tends to get very aggressive. He tends to get very loud, and I think Marinelli did a very good job of portraying that, but also showing the transformation of Eden as a character. As the film goes on, he starts to shift in a pretty dramatic way, and it can be hard for an actor to portray that, but Marinelli just did it to perfection, and I truly do think he is a real revelation in this movie. I don't know if it's like one of the best performances of the year, like, best actor or something like that, but like, I definitely really loved his performance in this movie. I thought that he was just so compelling throughout, and he really is what makes this film so great. And the rest of the actors, I think, are pretty good here too. Particularly Jessica Cressy, I thought was really strong as the character of Elena. I thought the chemistry between her and Martin, these two worked very well together, and I enjoyed their sort of bonding throughout the film. I think everyone here, acting-wise, does a really strong job. But getting to Pietro Marcello's directing, that's another thing I think that works really well when it comes to this film. The film is very well directed in the sense that Marcello is very clear on what he's really trying to do. It's a film that can be, I think, very hard to direct, but he directs it with a lot of passion. He directs with a lot of spirit, and I think it works very well when it comes to this film. The film can get very dramatic, but it never gets too overly dramatic, and I think that's what he overall did a really good job with in this film. I thought his directing was really solid overall, and the writing as well is really well done. The film does a very good job of getting you into the head of someone like Martin Eden, showing you his writing, but also showing just his passion for every single thing that he does. Again, like I said, this is a guy that's just very passionate about everything that he does in life, and he isn't just gonna like sit back and let everyone else dictate to him what he should do. And so I think that part of it is very effective, but also the story itself of this guy that is from a very low-class type background. He was a sailor. He really hasn't interacted with these type of people before, and seeing how he interacts with them and the way that he at first is very intrigued, but as the film goes on, you really start to see he doesn't really like these people. He doesn't really want much of anything to do with them. In fact, Elena's family doesn't really want much to do with him either, and I think as a character, Martin Eden is very compelling in that way, because he's someone that, again, like I said, is very conflicted. He knows what he has to do if he wants to become this serious writer, but he doesn't know if he actually wants to take those steps, if he actually wants to educate himself more, if he actually wants to change his dialect, change his appearance, change all of this stuff. Does he want to alter himself completely. Is that something that he really is interested in doing? I think that part of the film is very interesting. And I think what this film has to say about like socialism as well, it's honestly very relevant to politics of today. A lot of people still talk about that kind of stuff, and Martin's stance on it is very interesting to watch. And I think that's something that was definitely one of the big highlights of this film. Really, my flaws with this movie, I would say, is that I just didn't find, besides Martin at least, while I really enjoyed his character, I just didn't find the other characters in this movie all that compelling. In fact, I found some of them to be very cliche. Elena's family especially, there's really not much to them. I mean, Martin squabbles with them a lot. He disagrees with them. They are vehemently opposed to the idea of him having anything to do with their family, but they never really change as characters. We never really get an in-depth look of who they really are, and I think that definitely does bring this film down. I would have actually liked it if we got just as much time with Elena and her family as we did with Martin Eden. It's very focused on him, which I understand it's trying to tell his story and things like that. But I just think that definitely does bring this film down overall. I just had a hard time investing in his character, sadly, and that definitely did bring the film down for me. I also did feel there were many points where this film did drag on. After the third or fourth scene of Martin getting into a fight, disagreeing with someone on his beliefs, clashing with people, it just gets a little old after a while, and I would have liked the film to maybe move it along a bit, and I think that definitely would have helped this film. I think cinematography-wise, though, this film has a very dynamic look to it. It's never really clear where we actually are in terms of setting, and I think that's very interesting. But the other thing I really liked about this movie is when Martin is writing, like this very like heavily stylized sequence that almost is like akin to like what you'd see in like a silent film. It was really well done the way that they went about it. It's kind of going through like his past and things like that, so I really like that. I like the score in this film, and also the third act I think is honestly perfect. I really wouldn't change a single thing about it, and I think the way the movie ends is really profound. I was not expecting them to end the movie in the way that they did, but I can't really think of a better way for it to wrap up than, honestly, the way it did. So overall, I definitely really did enjoy this one a lot. It's really just the fact that, like I said, those other characters just didn't really compel me all that much, and I wish they could have done a little bit more there. It's not a great movie, but I think it's one that's definitely worth checking out. So I am going to give Martin Eden overall a B. And well, with that, guys, we are done here. That is it for the last three films of 2020. I know there's still a few films left to go, like The Father that I haven't seen yet and things like that. But things like Pieces of a Woman, I'm just counting that as 2021 because that's its like official streaming release. I've always done that with like Netflix films, so I'm not going to change that here. Other than that, guys, that's it for this video. Hope you guys enjoy it. Of course, comment down below. Let me know what you guys think of any of these films. My best list will be coming very soon. Very excited to get that to you for sure. Always enjoy doing that video. We'll see you guys in my next video, and we'll see you guys for that. Okay, bye.